That's right. Do I need to backtrack at all, or you think we...
I'm Kurt Haskel. I'm an attorney in Michigan, and I was on the flight with the underwear bomber on Christmas Day 2009.
Passengers describe a terror attack and the arrest of a suspect who tried to blow up a plane as it landed at Metro Airport.
We heard a loud pop, then a bit of a smoke.
Sounded first like a balloon being popped.
All of a sudden, heard some screams, and flight attendants ran up and down the aisles, and
everything's crazy. People are screaming. There's fire on the plane.
So there was a lady shouting back, and she was saying things like, "What are you doing? What are you doing?"
At that moment, I was sure I was going to die.
And when I was at Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam on Christmas Day, my wife and I were coming back from a vacation we had in Africa, and this was our connecting flight back to Detroit. And there weren't two seats together to sit at while we were waiting for our flight, so we sat by the gate on the floor playing cards. And when we were playing cards, I looked up, and what caught my eye was a pair of men walking up to the counter. And one looked like a wealthier Indian man to me, and the other looked like a poor African. I thought he was a teenager, but apparently he was a little older then. But he looked like a poor African teenager. He only had on jeans and a white t-shirt in the middle of winter. And, I thought they were an odd pair, so I just kind of watched them as we were playing cards. And they went to the counter together, and the Indian-looking man spoke, and what he said was, "This man needs to get on the flight," referring to the African teenager. But he doesn't have a passport. And then the girl working at the counter said, "Well, you have to have a passport to get on the flight." And then the Indian man said, "Well, he's from Sudan. We do this all the time." And that's an exact word-for-word quote. And she said something along the lines of, "Well, I'll have to refer you to a manager," or something like that. And I think she did something on her computer, and then she sent the two of them down a hallway, and they walked down the hallway together, which was in a restricted area. And they walked down there without an escort, and then I quit watching at that point. At the Amsterdam airport, I didn't really notice anything that rose any suspicion with me. I saw what I did, but at the time it didn't mean anything to me. I'm just thinking, oh, here's someone that's not going to be boarding our flight. So, if you think of it how I was looking at it at the time, it really didn't mean anything. It meant so little I didn't even tell Lori about it until it became important later on. Coming in for a landing into Detroit, and the pilot came on the loudspeaker and said, "Flight attendants, take your seats. We're going to be preparing for landing soon." And just a few seconds after that, a flight attendant walked by my chair, by my seat, and I could hear a mumble, "Something smells like smoke," something along those lines. And I looked up. I had been looking at the monitor on the back of my seat to see our approach. And I looked up, and I could see smoke coming from the left side of the plane. And there was a bit of a skirmish going on. This was a plane that had two aisles, so this was occurring on the left side of the left aisle, and I was on the right aisle. So I ran up the right aisle to get a better look, and the smoke didn't last too long, and then a fire broke out, and a man was being hauled away into the first class area. There really wasn't a fight going on or anything, just someone grabbed him and hauled him away. So I didn't know at this point if it was a terrorist attack or what it was. I was more concerned about the fire that was spreading real fast. It spread to two seats and then the floor and then up the wall. And I went back to my seat, and Lori asked me what was going on. I said, the plane's on fire. And, we watched it as it was continuing to spread, and passengers were jumping on it, patting it down. And a flight attendant grabbed the fire extinguisher and ran over and put it out. Maybe the whole thing lasted a minute or two. It wasn't real long, but it was enough, where we thought that was it, that our plane was going to go down in flames.
The passenger aboard this plane arriving in Detroit was planning to blow up the aircraft, but the explosive device apparently failed. A Delta spokeswoman says the passenger was immediately subdued and was being questioned Friday evening. Authorities initially believed the passenger had set off firecrackers, causing some minor injuries. Flight 253 was carrying 278 passengers and was inbound to Detroit from Amsterdam.
When we landed, it was interesting for a few reasons. First of all, I thought we were just going to stop, the emergency chutes were going to open, and we're all going to jump out. But that's not what happened. We landed, we taxied right up to the gate. Several officers came on board, and I don't know who they're with, if they're TSA, Detroit Police, FBI, I don't really know. And they or a couple of them started yelling, saying, sit down and shut up, you're not getting off the plane, get it back in your seats, that kind of thing. And they all went into the first class area, and after maybe 20 minutes or so, the underwear bomber, who he's known as now, obviously we didn't know who he was at that point, got escorted off in handcuffs, and he stood in the front of the left aisle for maybe 20 seconds or so, and I got a good look at him then, and that's when I made the connection that it was the same person I saw in Amsterdam before we boarded. And I turned to Lori and I said, holy cow, I think I maybe have seen something important. They took him off the plane, and then there was a powder all over the place by where he sat. We got our carry-on bags, which to me I thought was another mistake. Being an attorney, I thought, they're destroying a crime scene here, and not knowing if there's an accomplice, another bomb or whatever. And we all kind of trampled right through by where he was sitting, right through this powder that was all over the place. Again, destroying the crime scene, but nobody seemed to care about it. And then we were taken into the terminal, and we were held in a baggage claim area that had been evacuated, and just passengers from our flight were there. And we were told to stand along this wall. We couldn't make any calls. We couldn't eat anything, drink anything, text anyone, use the bathroom. We couldn't do anything. We weren't really given much information except we're told to stand here. And after about an hour or so, some bomb-sniffing dogs were brought in. And one of the dogs caught on a smell of the bag of another Indian man who was standing maybe 20 feet away from me, with the group of all his passengers. So I would say most of the passengers saw this happen, not just me. And the dog sat down, and one of the officers came over to the man and took him into a side room to be interviewed. And they were in there a long time, maybe an hour. And then he came out of the room with an officer and was handcuffed, and then they took him away. At the same time, a different officer came up to the rest of us passengers and said something along these lines. I can't remember exactly word for word, but it was something like, I'm sure that you saw what just happened. You're not safe here. For obvious reasons, we're moving you to a different area and out of here. And then we were all escorted out of this baggage claim area and into this long hallway where we were at for a few more hours. During this time, again, we still weren't able to use the bathroom or make calls or eat or anything like that. And after a few hours, the person I would say was the lead investigator came up and said, we now have those responsible for this in custody, those plural, not the man or him. And then he went on to say, we're going to be doing quick interviews of all the rest of you, and then you'll be free to go. And then we're escorted back into the larger area, baggage claim area, where we initially were. And then we had to stand in line to do interviews before we could leave. And that's when I told the FBI what I had witnessed in Amsterdam for the first time.
turning now to the economic front, we have two interesting cases in the planned, yes, I said planned collapse of Europe through the whole financial crisis situation. Now, the first is a positive story. It's Iceland's Viking victory, written by Ambrose Evans Pritchard at the London Telegraph, one of the few mainstream reporters who actually knows what he's talking about, at least based on what I've read in the past. And his article starts with, "Congratulations to Iceland as the first country to suffer the full force of the global financial crisis. Iceland successfully completed a 3-year IMF-supported rescue program in August 2011, and goes on to explain some of the ways that they changed their markets, including a contraction of the 6.5% of GDP deficit down to only 0.5% in 2011, and appears to be on track to gain a fiscal surplus by 2012, headed